In the third year of marriage with my CEO husband. He fell in love with the assistant who saved his life. He bought flowers all over the city for her and used a drone to write her name in the air as a grand gesture of love. He indulged the girl in sending me provocative messages. In a relationship, the one not loved is called the third party. Ms. Kelly, you can't compete with me, I almost feel sorry for you. Until one day, he caught me entering a hotel with a young man. He angrily called me, Kelly, did you have an affair? But he didn't know. The reason I married him in the first place was to escape from my crazy brother who tried to force himself on me 8 years ago. And now, my brother is holding me in his arms, hanging up his call. What are you questioning? The one not loved is the other. The day Mike closed the deal happened to be my birthday. All the executives in the company watched him interact intimately with his assistant. What's wrong? Stomach ache? The man leaned back in his chair, gently rubbing the girl's waist and abdomen. You know, the girl's voice was as soft as a whisper, but Mike chuckled and said softly to her, I remember our date. It'll be over soon. And I, as the birthday girl of this party, sat directly opposite them. I put a bite of food in my mouth, but couldn't taste it. Mike's wife was still here. Are all those people flattering that little assistant? I assent. That assistant his mistress? In a few years, that little assistant is sure to rise to the top. The conversation stopped abruptly as I walked out of the restroom. I pretended not to hear, walked to the sink, and looked at myself in the mirror. These days, I seem to have become quite haggard, sitting on the couch waiting for Mike last night, waiting for him to come back with red marks all over his neck late at night. 3 months ago, he encountered an earthquake on a business trip. It was his newly hired assistant who saved him, and since that day, everything has felt off. He got drunk and called out her name while leaning on my shoulder. His phone was full of messages sent to her. He didn't even bother preparing for our once cherished anniversary just to comfort that assistant who was feeling unwell during her period. I realized that perhaps he had grown tired of me, so last night I finally confronted him about whether we should continue our days together. He tugged at the bangs of my hair playfully. Divorce? Do you dare? I recalled the reason why I married him in the first place. Just to make a certain madman give up. Somehow, with Mike, it turned into me not being able to let go of him. When I returned to the private room, some guests had already left. I walked up to Mike and asked him, Mike, could you take me home tonight? It was the first thing I said to him today. We were not like this before. He used to be somewhat gentle to me. The man looked down at me for a while. As he took out his car keys, I heard the girl beside him say, Mike, my stomach hurts. Will you take me to the hospital? The gaze the man had on me vanished in an instant, as he whispered softly to the girl, okay. Hang in there. The guests were not all gone yet. They all looked at me as if watching a joke. The girl took the initiative to hold his hand. She made a face at me where he couldn't see. I sighed, lowered my head, and looked at my phone. There were 2 messages that had been lying there unanswered for half an hour. Kelly, I'm back. Do you miss your brother? Honestly, in the 16 years when Edward didn't confess his feelings to me, I quite liked him. He was handsome, had good grades, and most importantly, he spoiled me too much. So much so that I often forgot I was adopted, that there was no blood tie between us. Until he cornered me in the gym equipment room and kissed me tenderly on my neck. He had long developed inappropriate feelings for me beyond siblings. I found a whole box of photos of me in his room, doing things while looking at my photos. Then my old man got so angry he had a stroke, breaking one of his ribs. He was sent abroad to study. It has been 8 years since then. I have been avoiding him for 8 years. No matter how he tried to contact me, I never replied. Until he stood in front of me. The headlights of the Maybach were a bit dazzling. There was a slight drizzle in the air, and I had originally called a driver to pick me up. Then I saw the person in the car. There was a moment when my soul seemed to tremble. I still remember that afternoon 8 years ago, how he took me to the gym equipment room and kissed me where he kissed me. The man's breath was too strong, mixed with the unique smell of locust flowers on him. I didn't understand how he had become like this. I was just afraid of the look in his eyes that seemed like he would devour me. And then I pushed him away, and the gym equipment rack fell down. He shielded me and got trapped underneath. I ran without looking back. It was only when the sun set that a passing teacher rescued him. That was the last time I saw him. And now, I am sitting in the passenger seat of his car. I know I can't escape. This is my family's car. Did you knock out my driver? I sighed and asked him. He leaned on the steering wheel and smiled at me. Smart. Bro. How did you come back? This was the first time in 8 years that I had a good look at him. He hadn't changed much, just sharper contours, deeper brows and eyes, still handsome, with a soft smile in his eyes as if to drown people there. I came looking for you, he gave me an expected answer. Leaning on the steering wheel, he said slowly, I heard you got married. I wanted to crash your wedding that day, but my old man had a few local thugs break my legs in advance. I can't come back, but I think of you every day. Do you know how much I miss you? He turned to look at me, with that same look in his eyes. I was scared. I felt that he would envelop me with the night, would invade every part of my body. Until his features loomed large. He planted a kiss on my lips. Kelly, can I chase you in a different way, bro? Taking me to a hotel is a different way to chase me, bro? Can you stop speeding, bro? There's a speed limit in the country. The car finally stopped. He reached out and ruffled my hair. Call me bro a few more times. I love it. Only then did he gently answer my first question. I don't have the house keys. I've been staying in a hotel. Mom and Dad went on vacation to the Maldives, and my brother probably took the opportunity to sneak back. Then I'll go back by myself. I stared into his eyes, replying to him. Kelly, I'm an adult man. I have many ways to get you back to my room. Sometimes it may not be very dignified. He tilted his head, showing me a charming smile. You're threatening me. He raised an eyebrow, bent down, and kissed the corner of my lips. Not threatening, coaxing, I corrected. Although Edward was expelled abroad, he must have had money. The hotel room was the presidential suite, quite large. And I was relieved that there was a high probability this person wouldn't do anything to me. He turned off the lights, pressed me against the wall, and kissed me. In that moment, I realized my mistake. I shouldn't have believed in the animalistic thoughts I had for my sister when I was 17. For him, what mattered most was what he could get. Memories flooded back like shadows, and after all these years, I finally understood why I had pushed my brother away without hesitation back then. This revelation was unveiled when Mike wanted to get intimate with me. I was afraid of being touched extensively by someone. The doctor said it was a psychological disorder. So, this time, I abruptly pushed away from Edward, tears uncontrollably streaming down. He crouched in front of me. Do you really hate your brother so much? He wiped the tears from my cheeks. Smiling, he was always smiling, with a tone that echoed the way he used to coax me in childhood. All right, I won't touch you anymore. It's my fault for being your brother. I promise never to touch you again, okay? I couldn't believe him at all. But this time, he got up for real, ruffled my hair, and turned on the light. I'll go take a shower. Only then could I see his silhouette clearly, looking somewhat desolate. For some reason, I felt like my heart had also been kneaded by someone. Sitting in the corner, listening to the sound of water gradually coming from the bathroom, my mind was in turmoil. Until the phone started vibrating. It was Mike. I answered it reflexively. Just as I picked up, I heard a series of coquettish sounds. What was happening on the other end of the line was self-evident. Before I could say anything, the call was abruptly ended, abruptly stopped, like a misdialed call. What was this? Provocation? Or am I being made a joke between them? I stared at the phone, a mix of emotions surging in my heart. I don't know how long I stayed there until a knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. Opening the door, I realized that many doors were open outside. It was the police. Please show us your identification. They were actually checking the rooms. Many guests were outside complaining about the investigation, saying they came to the deluxe suite. The police made it clear that they were just doing their duty. Indeed, they had discovered a den there. I naturally cooperated with the investigation, went inside to get my documents. As soon as I stepped out, I noticed two familiar figures in the room opposite ours. I never expected to encounter these two here. Me, Mike, and his assistant Lucy stood face to face. Mike furrowed his brow and asked, "What are you doing here?" "No need to ask, you've been tailing us," Lucy interjected. No, I wanted to explain, but halfway through, I realized it probably wasn't a good explanation. Instead, I kept quiet, and the police investigating me cut in. "This is my identification. My roommate is still in the shower and will be out in a while." Before he could finish speaking, a female voice interrupted. "Don't lie to the police officer for the sake of face. You've got someone with you too?" Mike squinted his eyes. "Kelly, go back, stop embarrassing yourself here." The two across seemed convinced that I had been secretly following them. But this time I really was still standing there. Mike's tone was obviously heavier this time. "Kelly, had enough trouble? If you stop now, maybe I won't divorce you." His words were cut short because he saw a man wearing a bathrobe coming out from my room, draping his arm around my shoulder and smiling at them. "Kelly, isn't this the person you wanted me to beat up 3 years ago at your wedding? Now, should I beat him up for you? Do you mind?" "Kelly, who is this?" "You better explain it to me." Mike's voice suddenly turned cold, his stern gaze locked on me. In the 3 years I had been with him, I had always been gentle and obedient. So naturally, he had never suspected me of doing anything out of line. Perhaps Mike and Edward both had no objections. But it was obvious that the police officers present couldn't hold back anymore. "I don't care about any personal grudges you may have. Anyone who starts a fight here needs to go back immediately and cooperate with the investigation," one of them said, turning to me and Edward. "What's your relationship?" Lying to the police was clearly not a good option, especially since our last names on our identity cards could explain everything. "Siblings," I replied. I distinctly heard a chuckle from Mike after I answered that question. "Kelly, who would have thought? You got your brother to play a stranger, thinking I would get jealous?" He took a few steps closer to me, looking down with a smirk. "Don't play mind games. If you keep this up, you'll only make me dislike you more, understand?" The looming shadow made me instinctively take a few steps back. My reaction seemed to confirm his suspicions even more. He gave me a deep look and then turned around, walking back to the room across the hall, holding the girl's hand. The next moment, I was pulled back into the room by my brother. Leaning against the hotel room door, he said, "Kelly, do you think he knows that, as your brother, I won't let him do anything to you?" My brother's kisses trailed from my ear to my jaw. The room wasn't lit, and the sounds of the activities from the corridor outside continued. I was not focused, so his fingers intentionally grazed my tailbone. Until the last string in my mind snapped. I pushed him away abruptly. My brother let me, taking a few steps back. The moonlight fell heavily in his eyes, and he smirked at me, saying, "Kisses but no hugs, huh?" I always felt like he belonged to the night, obscure and unpredictable, with his thoughts hidden. "You are my brother," I stared into his eyes and slowly uttered those words. "Kelly," he called my name, "I'm a pervert." He tilted my chin up to stop my breathing, pressing me against the wall, controlling my hands above my head. Being unreasonable with me. After my breath was abruptly cut off, I thought my brother would continue, but he stopped. After kissing my lips once, he asked me, "Fear of physical contact? It's only with extensive physical contact that it becomes like this." Wrapped in a blanket, I sat on the hotel bed with my brother sitting beside me. We used to be like this when we were kids, back when he wasn't a lunatic yet. Dad was strict, so his room was often where I sought refuge. "When did it start?" he asked me. "In elementary school or high school?" I don't remember the specifics. I stared at the bright moon outside, its light casting our shadows. "So, when I pushed you away earlier, I started but stopped." I didn't understand why I felt the need to explain this to my brother. My brother didn't say anything, and there was dead silence. At that moment, my phone saved me. However, seeing Dad on the screen brought my heart to a standstill. In my memory, George was just like his job. A prestigious university professor, always strict, restrained, and severe. After all, only a father with a cold heart could break his son's rib and send him abroad. Kelly, your mom and I have a flight landing at 7 tomorrow night. Are you coming back this early? I was surprised. My brother was sitting beside me, playing with my hair absent-mindedly. Let's not mention our affair. How are things with Mike? Invite him for dinner this weekend. Mike was my father's chosen son-in-law, and my marriage was also orchestrated by my father. My parents held high positions in the academic world, and Mike came from a wealthy family, making it an ideal match. Edward chuckled on the side, and I almost lunged at him to cover his mouth. Kelly, do you have a man in your life? Who is it? My father's voice intervened promptly. Is it Mike? What are you doing? Who are you with? Turn on the video. The questioning was severe. Suddenly, I felt like I was back in that suffocating childhood, devoid of any privacy, everything manipulated. The call was abruptly ended. My brother hung up. The world fell back into silence, and I locked eyes with him. Do you feel like George just wants a machine? He asked, a machine that does everything he says, without talking back. That's what I've been to him all these years. Not allowed to be happy, to live within neat boundaries, filled with all the filth until it overflows. That night, I don't know what got into me. Perhaps Mike's actions had triggered something, or maybe my estranged brother's veneer of gentleness had touched a nerve. So, the burgeoning desires unconsciously sprung forth, tearing through the pretense. I stared into the eyes of the man in front of me. I was determined to do something out of the ordinary. Brother, I said, I pushed you away before because I'm sick. I'm still sick now, but I can endure it if needed. In the darkness, I grabbed his collar and kissed his lips, disrupting his breath. Brother, would you bone with me? My brother held the shower head. The water flowed over my skin in the darkened bathroom, with only faint moonlight seeping through the door crack, making it hard to see each other clearly. Don't pretend you're tough. Crying like this, what am I to do? He leaned against the tub, smiling at me, the water snaking around as his voice mixed with indistinct whispers. Seducing my brother almost led me to instinctively grab a pillow and smother him. He allowed me to smother him, as if he didn't care for his life. You're crying, my brother stated. Whenever I cried, he couldn't bear to resist. I hugged my knees close. Mock me, I'm truly useless. A soft towel fell on me, and I could never quite understand Edward. He was a strange one. Persistently pursuing me while standing apart whenever I wanted to get closer. So, take it slow? His wet lips landed on my forehead, and he always smiled at me, seemingly effortlessly in control. So, for some reason, I felt a rush of shame. Brother, his voice trailed off slightly, teasingly brushing my wet bangs, you're truly a pervert, going after your little sister. Not angry, not provoked. The gentle water droplets beat against my neck as he chuckled. Do you know how excited a pervert gets when someone curses at them? Are you going to take me away? Brother? We locked eyes in the silence of the dark night. After a long while, I rubbed his wrist against my forehead and softly asked him the question. Mike probably didn't expect me to return home at this hour. I opened the front door, and the dim light in the living room revealed a man sitting on the couch, looking deeply at me. Kelly, where were you? He had never questioned my whereabouts, because for 3 years of our marriage, it was always him betraying me. It's none of your business. I entered the room, only to find him staring fixedly at me. The coat I was wearing belonged to my brother. Have I been neglecting you these days? I'm sorry. He rubbed his brow slightly. Lucy is different to me, in a way. I didn't want to hear him talk about his female assistant with a pitying tone, but he seemed convinced that I was the type he could control easily. Give me some time, okay? As I walked past him, he casually pulled me into his arms. You are more important, you are my wife. But you have to understand, I can't control feelings. The man's brow touched my neck. A sudden disgust rose in me, knowing that Edward would never treat me this way. I pushed him away struggling and said coldly to him, I will send you the divorce agreement to your email tomorrow morning. It's over between us, Mike. You can pursue your assistant afterwards. Moonlight fell on his brow. Suddenly, he laughed, squinting teasingly. Divorce? And what will you do once you regret it? Beg me to come back to you? I haven't finished drafting the divorce agreement yet. My dad's call came before that. You want a divorce? Kelly. Why didn't you discuss such a big matter with me? What are you dissatisfied with, Mike? Why didn't you talk to me? Do you still consider me your dad? Come back soon. Explain to me what can't be solved. He sounded so angry that I didn't even finish listening and hung up his call directly. I had hung up on him twice in the past few days. He was probably going to be furious. But I didn't expect him to come directly to the house. And he brought Mike along. Dad, don't be too angry. Kelly is just throwing a tantrum. I'll help her calm down. The man, dressed in a slightly humble knit sweater, looked like a gentle and family-oriented son-in-law at first glance. I watched him acting coldly. He smiled at me, as if saying, I've given you a way out, follow it quickly. Dad, why don't you ask him about his relationship with his assistant? Since I didn't show him any mercy, Mike's expression noticeably cooled for a moment. But quickly, he regained his usual composure. What's there to worry about? I hired an assistant, it's inevitable we'll have some interaction. Kelly, it's just a misunderstanding. I truly admired his ability to fabricate lies. But I forgot one thing, Mike was my dad's approved son-in-law, and in every aspect, my dad was extremely satisfied with him. So in a moment, I believed his words. Kelly, you're an adult, why are you making a fuss over such a trivial matter? He always disregarded my thoughts. I laughed, looking at the two men in front of me. Suddenly, I understood something. If rebellion was on my part, if I wasn't obedient, then I could be the one abandoned overseas. Being discarded ruthlessly once I lost value, why should I endure to such an extent? I don't know if it was because of my dad's visit. These days, Mike's attitude towards me had changed slightly. He was coming home on time, even in the mood to share daily life with me every day, as if we were back to how we used to be. Until one night, he sat beside me. Naturally, he reached out to rub my belly. Shouldn't you be mad at me anymore? Kelly, should we have a child? The medical device company he invested in needed to cooperate with the research institute where my dad worked for a long time. And using a child to tie down a woman was undoubtedly the most effective way. Why do you want to have a child with me? So you can mess around with other women while I'm pregnant? He looked at me and then discreetly added more alcohol to my glass. How is that possible? With a child, you'll have something to do, right? Seeing me unmoved, he raised his glass and drank it all in one go. It seemed like he was prepared to cultivate our relationship that night. Kelly, you cared so much about the women around me. It shows that you still have me in your heart. You can't let go, can you? You can't deceive me. He reached up to lift my chin, but I dodged, adding more alcohol to his glass. Perhaps it was the emotions of that night, but he went on talking to me, admitting that neglecting me was his fault. I rarely apologize, especially not like this. Forgive me, okay? I seldom back down, especially not being coaxed like this. Forgive me? I don't do things like that. Forgive me, okay? He wanted to kiss me. But I avoided him and took out something to show him. Sign on the top, and I'll forgive you. Mike probably didn't even know how bad his tolerance was, as he was already dazed from the alcohol. I had to get close to see clearly. What's this? He was obviously dizzy and thought his coaxing was working, so he smiled at me after signing the agreement. Okay, I'll do whatever my wife asks of me. I watched him finish signing on the agreement before taking it away. He tried to grab my wrist, but I pulled away, and he fell flat on the dining table, mumbling, Kelly, come home with me, don't leave. The next day, Mike said he wanted to throw a birthday party for me. It was really grand this time, held in the most upscale banquet hall, specially inviting a large group of family and friends. The setup was so romantic, like a wedding. Are you satisfied with this kind of compensation? He texted me on his phone. I looked down at the messages until the lights in the banquet hall suddenly dimmed. The guests fell silent for a moment as a beam of light shone on the man walking slowly towards the stage. He was in a suit, coming towards me with a smile full of warmth in his eyes. I am truly a very busy person. Busy enough to sometimes forget the person waiting for me at home. Busy enough to sometimes miss a genuine heart. So, I want to take this opportunity to apologize to someone I have loved for so long. Will you forgive me, my wife? He raised his eyebrows, smiling warmly at me as he handed me a bouquet of beautiful flowers. This caused a stir in the audience. I didn't expect that Mike, who is usually so indifferent, could be so romantic. What about his past with his assistant? Was it just a rumor, but the discussion was not over and I hadn't taken the bouquet yet? A stranger, a woman with glasses and a simple look, suddenly burst into the banquet hall. As soon as she saw Mike, she rushed over and grabbed his hand. Mike! I'm Lucy's friend. Please hurry and go see her. She's about to jump off a building. I saw clearly Mike's pupils dilate in that moment. Makes sense, I hadn't heard any news about his assistant for several days. I didn't know how he had handled it. What's with Lucy? My dad frowned beside me. This is my daughter's birthday party. Irrelevant people, please leave now. He was about to have the security guards remove her, but Mike abruptly stopped it. Where is she? The man seemed flustered, tossed the flowers in my arms, and was about to leave for the door. My dad was getting anxious, running over to drag him back. Where do you think you're going? You don't know whose birthday it is today. Who knew Mike would just push him away? Kept dialing the phone incessantly. Why aren't you answering my calls? Lucy said, I never want to see you again in my life. The girl who came to find him hesitated to speak. His back stiffened for a moment, then he went madly to open the door. Mike! Come back to me. Do you want my daughter to become a joke? Everyone in the banquet hall was watching this farce. Even my father was so angry that he couldn't hold it in. But it was this sentence that made Mike pause for a second, and then he walked away without looking back. At that moment, a motorcycle roared directly into the banquet hall. No one expected this turn of events. And no one expected that I would be picked up and carried to the back seat by someone. Kelly, at that moment, I wanted to elope like this. The man's joking voice came muffled from behind the helmet. Mike's hand was still on the door handle, watching me being embraced by the man. I sneered at him, then threw a document at him. Forgive you? I'm sorry, we got divorced last night. The divorce agreement, you signed it yourself. Before leaving that night, my brother held my hand and said the last thing to me, okay, Kelly, let me take you away. So now, I was sitting on the back of his motorcycle, cutting through a series of guests' gasps. I started to be grateful that Mike had booked a room on the first floor, otherwise Edward's motorcycle might not have been able to soar through the backyard. I hugged his waist tightly, the night wind swept in, the colorful night view flashed by like a stream of light, but at a certain moment it merged into an endless chase. Bro, where are we going? I leaned over his shoulder and asked him in his ear. The howling wind rustled through the flying collars, and he said, to a place where no one can find us. Until I was 26, I had been living as a proper, obedient, and virtuous wife as my father demanded. But who could have imagined? He froze my bank card, called me a dozen times, and I didn't answer any of them. I would be in a cheap motel, pressed against the door by my brother, letting him kiss me. How did it feel? He kissed my nose and said, the scent of the brother had never been so strong. I began to understand what this person, who had been with me throughout my youth, had done to me. The feeling of betrayal was overwhelming. I always cry in front of my brother, then I realized that when I was wronged, he would stop, and no one else would. So I always cry, always. He gently bent over, touched the tears on my cheek. He always called me Kelly. But he didn't know that in his eyes there was a Kelly that I had been looking for 26 years, but could never find. Don't be afraid. From now on, I will take care of you, okay? He put a bank card in my pocket. I had a dream. In high school, once because I didn't make it to the top 10 of my grade, my father beat me with a bamboo stick until it bled. I hid in my brother's room. clutching his sleeve, asking him to take me away. I don't remember his reaction at the time, most likely he was coaxing me to sleep. So when I woke up, I was a bit resentful. There was a heavy rain outside the window. And I escaped with my brother on a ship in Indonesia. It was said to be escaping, but after leaving the country, they couldn't catch up with us. I always felt like my brother was in a hurry, desperately pulling me to do something. This feeling became stronger in the past few days. I was sitting on him when he said, "Bro, why must we go to the volcano today? Can't we do it tomorrow?" No. The man looked at me very reasonably, his fingers brushing my waist. My body resisted extensive contact, but my soul wanted to get closer to him. "Bro, you always have a lot of secrets. I've told you everything I can." The cabin swayed, he stared into my eyes, like containing lakes and rivers, slow and leisurely. "What can't be said?" "It's something very dirty." "How dirty?" "Want to sleep with his own sister, is that dirty enough?" My brother always confronted me with very brutal reality to cover up his sadness. So I finally understood, loving me was painful for my brother. But he didn't know, I had a secret too. I loved him. Before he loved me. I was the most despicable thing. The volcano was beautiful, the eternal blue fireworks were also beautiful. But after climbing it, I felt like dying physically and mentally. I don't know how I managed to walk back to the hotel by sheer willpower, and when I collapsed on the bed, I didn't want to move at all. Somewhat hazy, I heard my brother's muffled words by my side. He was lying next to me, the bed sinking in one place, his fingers casually flicking my hair. "Kelly, the volcano has been climbed with you. Where did you say you wanted to go back then?" So on that day, I finally remembered. When I hid in my brother's room and asked him to take me away, what did he say to me? He brought a travel brochure and asked me to mark it. Tears welled up in my eyes as I looked at him. I marked it. "Will you take me there?" The young man sat beside me, the moon setting in his eyebrows. "Kelly, I can't do it now. One day, brother will take you where you want to go." I woke up at 4 in the afternoon, hungry. I saw rain outside the window. The city was always overcast, the continuous wind moved the old window mullions. The large grass outside the house swayed. Edward was sitting on a recliner beside me, his face covered with a book, head tilted back. At some point, a very scary speculation formed in my mind. I called his name softly, he didn't move. So I removed the book he was holding up, shook him, and he still didn't move. I was about to reach out and check his breath when he finally moved his body. My brother's eyelashes touched my palm, he rubbed his messy hair. Then sat up and smiled at me. "Kelly, why do you cry every time you don't see brother around? It's because you look like you're about to die." I stared at him without saying a word, letting him kiss away my tears. My brother was fragile. This was the lesson I learned in the 36 days of being with him. Not psychologically, not physically, but factually. Even if the sky fell and he had to bear it, I felt that he would disappear like the wind in the next second. The hotel had its own hot spring pool because it was close to the volcano. I had slept straight through the night and hadn't showered, so I eagerly soaked in the pool. Before I could enjoy it, my brother pushed open the door and came in. He was loosely draped in a shirt, probably not intending to bathe with me. I beckoned him to come over, and he crouched by the edge of my pool. I pulled him into the water. He never guarded against me, so he fell into the water easily. He choked a few times, then stuck his head out of the water, still smiling. "Kelly, you." I pressed him against the edge of the pool. Seeing his blushing ears, I leaned in and whispered in his ear. "Bro, I know. Back in high school, you actually didn't like me, did you? When it comes to unacceptable love, I was the first. Because I knew who I had a crush on back then, and I knew what kind of despicable feeling I was confessing. Why wouldn't I like you?" The man held against the edge of the water looked at me, wet fingers pinching my nose. Smiling unabashedly, he said, "You are the most important thing in my life." I stared into his eyes, it was crucial. Not love. "Hey. Do you remember, bro? There was a game popular in school for a while. As long as both parties left each other's names on the blog, the system would leave a successful matching message. "Did you leave my name?" Without hesitation, my brother said, "Of course." "I left yours, Edward." At that moment, I clearly saw a drastic change in my brother's expression, as if completely taken aback by the unexpected shock, standing there stunned. "Now." I pinched his waist. "Can you tell me why you did that to me? You clearly are not a pervert lusting after your own sister. Not an extreme control freak. Why did you do that to me, ruining your own future?" My brother suddenly laughed in a misty haze. He raised his hand, gently touched my forehead. "Kelly. Do you know, Kelly, you are the most precious to me. And Kelly should shine forever, never dimming at any moment." I didn't know who I attracted attention to in high school. I didn't know that the prestigious, always friendly and kind top math teacher was a habitual offender. He had made advances towards many girls, but never faced any consequences. Because he had someone covering for him, omniscient. My brother found out that I had become a target of that teacher. It was once when he delivered homework to the office late. He saw the teacher kissing my picture from the roster hastily. Seeing that scene, when he reacted, I had already knocked that old man to the ground. The mist in the hot spring dissipated into ripples. My brother hugged me, telling me intermittently. I probably hit his face multiple times, but he didn't dodge. He just looked at me. Then said to me, "Kelly, your sister." When I told him I would call the police, he smirked in front of me. "I had never seen a pervert animal like him," he said. "Even if he was released from prison, he would still target you. He had his eyes on you." I hit his head with an ashtray 3 times. But he didn't die. He still came to class, with bandages the next day. But since that day, I felt like I was living in hell. That day he looked nothing like he was lying, more like a venomous snake that had found its prey. Since that day, my mind was filled with images of you being raped by him, watching your every move vigilantly, afraid of you being called into his office. Even at night, all I thought about was how to kill him. I stayed up all night investigating him, until one day, I found his social media account. He made comments on some illegal forums. I found out that this pervert actually had a serious virginity complex, only liking young and inexperienced virgins. My long hair billowed in the water. I watched my brother comb my hair while looking down, narrating shocking truths in a calm tone. After knowing his fetish, I thought all night. If he likes virgins, then I will make sure his target is not a virgin. That day he was actually checking equipment in the gym. I deliberately lured you over, just to show him. No wonder my brother was so focused on kissing me only. The movements on the upper body were crazy, scaring me away. But on the lower half, the part the teacher couldn't see, he didn't do anything. That pervert was not easy to fool. He might have thought I was deceiving him. So you intentionally let Dad see you doing that stuff with my picture, let Dad catch you at school, act like a crazed person to force me, and then blow the matter up at school, burdened with the label of being a pervert lusting after his sister. I took over his words. My brother looked calmly at me opposite. I had to become an even bigger pervert than the pervert, making that beast truly feel that you were dirty. Was it a foolish method? Yeah. I nodded. Tell me the truth, I let you do it back then. There's no need to think your physical resistance was because you didn't like me. Before I could finish, my brother sealed my lips with a kiss. Amidst a mist of water, I clenched his sleeve, suddenly feeling pain as he lightly bit my lip corner. So, don't you understand now? Do you understand how I love you with what kind of feelings? Kelly, if there's a God in this world, he must punish me for doing the most unforgivable thing. I'm a complete animal. His fingers found my palm, but slowly tightened. But Kelly, hold on a bit longer. Brother will soon be punished by the gods. But my brother didn't notice that I didn't resist his touch anymore. Not long ago. Later, my brother took me to see the aurora in Murmansk. We kissed in the lavender fields in Provence. And wrestled with leopards at the foot of Mount Kilimanjaro. We went to many places, so many that every moment there was more exciting than my life before. Finally, we looked at the list, and I was just one item away from fulfilling my childhood wishes. Before heading to the final destination, we stayed at a small inn. Edward went to check in, and I sat alone on a wooden chair in the lobby. Suddenly, a Chinese-looking staff member approached and said to me in broken English, "Is this your phone?" To avoid tracking, Edward and I had changed our contact devices several times. I was caught off guard and answered. On the other end of the phone came a gentle voice I hadn't heard in a long time. "Kelly, can you listen to what Mom has to say? I know you're angry with us. But your brother's illness can't wait anymore. It's Mom." I hung my head. I couldn't remember how many heartfelt words she said to me through sobs that day. I just remembered hanging up when my brother came towards me. "Whose call?" My brother tilted his head and asked me. "Wrong number." I stood up, hugged his neck and kissed him, causing him to stumble and rub my head. "Why so clumsy?" I smirked, pulling my brother's hand into the room. This time, it was his turn to be pushed onto the bed by me. My brother lying there was just a huge seduction. Whenever I was in a hurry, he wasn't. "Why so wild tonight? Don't be afraid of hurting, okay? But don't cry." My brother said. That night, I seemed to be letting out my anger. I buried myself in his neck. We both sweated a lot, so he didn't know I cried. In fact, he was right, I couldn't do without him. The next day, we rushed to catch a connecting flight. On the plane, I slept leaning on him, waking up midway once, his coat covering me. "Are you cold? You sneezed several times this morning." Out on the balcony last night, I cut off the man's words. "Bro, Iceland is the last stop. After we're done, what are your plans?" I absent-mindedly changed the subject. He looked at me. "I don't know. I haven't thought about anything else. I just want to accompany you to the end." I nodded, and the plane landed. I took my brother off the plane. He had been idly playing with my hand before, but froze the moment we disembarked. "Kelly, sending your brother abroad is not only to fulfill his desire but also to seek treatment for his illness. Your brother's condition, if left untreated, is fatal. It's rare, and it requires money, effort, and Mike's family's help. He had secretly returned to the country, originally intending to see you, but somehow insisted on taking you with him. You can't drag him along anymore." My brother stood still, motionless. He saw the black Bentley and a few familiar faces getting out, our parents, Mike. I heard him speak, trembling. "Weren't we going to escape together, Kelly?" I took a deep breath and realized that saying that sentence wasn't difficult. "No, brother. I give up." After returning to the country, my brother was sent to a specialized hospital for treatment. I didn't end up marrying Mike. He knew I needed money and the best medical equipment. My brother was suffering from pulmonary arterial hypertension. 15 out of 1,000,000 people have this condition. Later, I learned that my brother wasn't just critically ill, he was on the brink of death. Every moment he spent traveling with me, he could have died from right heart failure. Mike's assistant, Lucy, jumped off a building and was left in a vegetative state. He blamed me for everything. He coldly mocked and humiliated me. "I never realized you were this kind of woman. Interested in your own brother, have some shame, will you?" I got angry and wanted to throw a family's antique vase at his face. He just smiled indifferently. "Go ahead, throw it. If you throw it, your brother will have one less dose of his medication. He'll be like a bird with a broken wing, right?" The man walked up to me, pinching my chin. "Kelly, I can't stand to see you happy. How about you come down to hell with me, huh?" Mike asked me to see Edward. But all I could do was watch him through the glass room from afar. I didn't know what he was plotting until I noticed that there was always a beautiful nurse taking care of Edward, changing his bandages with intimate touches and caring words. Each day, there were physical contacts, caring gestures. How many days do you think it will take for him to fall in love with her? I sneered. "Do you think everyone is like you?" The man leaning against the doorframe looked at me with lowered eyes for a moment, then chuckled. "Don't think other people are so noble. What if I make him lose some memory?" Mike chuckled and told me that there was a side effect in Edward's medication that caused him to lose a bit of memory every day. The changes were subtle and daily. Yet Edward found out. I heard that day he almost broke millions worth of medical equipment. I don't want to be treated. If you care about me, take me away. He had someone deliver a note to me from the hospital with 3 lines scribbled on it. That day, I sat on the long corridor of the hospital ward. My brother's handwriting wasn't usually like this. If he wrote it himself, there was only one possibility: he couldn't hold the pen anymore. I never thought that the person who always smiled at me would one day become like this. My mother wiping her tears as she spoke, "Your brother has been treated for 10 years, but he is still inching closer to death. His immune system was gradually weakening, his consciousness becoming less clear after taking the medication." Later, I saw it. My brother asked for sticky notes and wrote my name all over the room. He didn't want to forget me. Sometimes, I stood outside the room's glass window, and he didn't know I could see him. I saw him meticulously write my name, place them on the glass wall, as if doing so could help him remember me. Later, after taking the medicine, he always fell asleep, unaware that I watched him every day. Until one day, he woke up groggily from his sleep. He asked the nurse whose name was on the wall. This situation happened 3 or 4 times. Sometimes he could remember me, sometimes he couldn't. His emotions started becoming more unstable, and the doctors had to prescribe more sedatives for him. But he pulled out the needle, refused to see anyone other than me. Things took an unexpected turn. He never treated those nurses well. He smashed the birthday cake they gave him on the nurse's face. Then he curled up in the corner of the bed. He didn't know that I could see him. He pulled out the needle and carved my name on his arm to show me. Glass couldn't transmit sound, so I could only see him desperately smashing the glass and then being restrained by the medical staff who rushed in. Mike realized that Edward was not following his script and suddenly didn't allow me to see him anymore. Edward knew that he couldn't heal properly with you outside. For his sake, maybe you should stop seeing him too. He conspired with my father. They locked me up. For those days, I sat alone, hugging my knees, counting the sunsets, closing my eyes with my brother's image in my mind. One day, I suddenly realized I was mistaken. I had made myself out to be noble. In reality, I just wanted my brother. I wanted to see him. I wanted to hug him. I was a despicable person. When I saw my brother smashing the glass for me, I felt like I existed in his heart. What's wrong with love? I tried to break the lock, but it wouldn't budge. Then I stared at the curtain, tied it into a knot, and climbed out of the window. I never thought that at the age of 26, my escape would officially begin again. The dawn burned the clouds on the horizon, and I pedaled frantically on the only bike I could find to save someone who had once saved me. I finally understood what my brother was trying to tell me as he smashed the glass. Do not believe in fate. Fight it, Kelly. I suddenly realized that my brother and I had walked this road countless times. Every time he rode me to and from school on his bike. The wind often tousled our hair. Rows of towering buildings mixed with the dawn's reflections. To save my brother, I had to watch him forget me. This was the fate that Mike had set for me. But I refused. I wanted to hug him, I wanted to find him, even if it meant a tragic ending. So what if the ending isn't good? So what, wasn't it enough that I possessed him? Cowards are always indecisive. This time, I wanted to be crazy, only caring about the love in front of me. I climbed the stairs of the hospital. I ran towards his room. Then I saw the customized glass being smashed open by expensive medical instruments. My brother climbed out from inside. He looked at me with deep eyes. I realized that my brother was also a crazy person. He came over and pushed me down on a hospital chair to kiss me without a word. I had never seen him so angry before. He almost seemed like he was going to devour me, and I was too weak, so I slowly slipped to the ground. You don't want me anymore, Kelly? You don't want me? He leaned on my shoulder, biting me. Do you want to be a CEO's wife now? Or do you really regard me as your brother? Say it again. Brother? He wiped away my tears, his action somewhat fierce. I knew he had taken a lot of psychiatric drugs, which made his emotions unstable. So I let him pinch my chin. Don't cry. Do you think crying every time is useful? But I couldn't hold back. His sudden harsh tone made me break down in tears even more. Then what should I do? You're going to die, brother. What can I do? Is that what I wanted? Why are you angry? I don't want you anymore. Neither of us probably expected to argue like this here. And after hearing me say I didn't want you anymore, he suddenly fell silent. The night fell silent instantly. I finally realized he was a patient and was afraid he would suddenly faint. Just as I was about to soften my tone, my brother raised his hand and gently rubbed my chin. Don't not want your brother. My heart sank. I looked at him through tear-filled eyes. Then what should I do? If you don't get treated, you'll die. What should I do? He caught my chin, squatted in front of me, and smiled as he rubbed my head. That day, just as the dawn light rose and scattered on the glass, we made a scene, but the medical staff who had just come upstairs didn't dare to approach us two lunatics squatting among the shattered glass. Let's go to the pier and get some fries. What? I mean, Kelly. Our final stop is Iceland, and I haven't finished the journey with you yet. Epilogue, later, my parents settled in Iceland. Eric stamped the snow under his feet, then carefully took the baby from the woman's hands and walked into the house. In this city where the temperature is always 0 degrees, the moment you hide in a warm and heated house, your whole soul will relax. The old TV station was still playing local programs, and the old man sitting in the rocking chair did not notice the noise at the entrance. Mom, I brought Kathy and the baby back, Eric called out twice before the old man opened his eyes groggily. Welcome, welcome. It's been over 10 days, miss me, Grandma? The old man teased the child, laughing heartily, and then suddenly froze, tapping his head. Look at my memory, I was cooking soup. You guys wait, I'll turn off the fire. Watching the old man hurry into the kitchen, the woman bent down to tidy up the baby's clothes and then chatted casually with her husband about what just happened. And what about later? Your grandparents? Well, I haven't seen those two since I was little. The relationship should be completely broken. And the CEO? No news. My dad brought back a piece of domestic news before. It seems like he got drunk and drove off a cliff. Well, that's karma, Mom. I'll help you carry it. The woman joked. As she saw the old man come out with a large pot of soup, she quickly stepped forward to assist. The dishes were still exquisite and appetizing. In this city at the other end of the earth, it's not easy to find such delicious food. That's why the woman always eats a lot whenever she comes, and her grandson loves her cooking. He smiled with his dark eyes gleaming. He really looks like his grandfather, don't you think? After dinner, the old man held his grandson in his arms, sharing an old photo frame with her. The photo was probably taken more than 10 years ago. The man in the picture had his arms around the woman, both smiling at the camera. You could tell they were a handsome couple, no wonder Eric had such good genes. The old man wiped the frame clean, but as he kept wiping, he seemed to be lost in thought. It's been a while since I dreamt of them. Why did they suddenly appear in my dreams this afternoon, Mom? It's been almost 10 years since Dad passed away. The son sat beside her, handing her a peeled apple. Don't stay alone all the time, it's too boring, find a companion, okay? What about that guy from the farm next door, Peter or Evan, isn't he nice? The old man just smiled to herself upon hearing this. Time never defeats a beauty, she remained gentle as ever when she lowered her eyes, staring at the frame, continuously wiping the yellowed thin glass. The family's evening was joyous and harmonious. The wind and snow outside the window were howling against the window frames. When it was time to turn off the lights, Eric took the child upstairs to bed. Since the old man usually lived alone, he was worried about her feeling lonely for a long time without company. When he went upstairs, he saw the old man sitting motionless on the sofa. Mom, you should sleep early. He was concerned, going over to remind her. In the dim light, the old woman tightened her shawl, then said something out of context. Dreamt of Edward. He's so patient, maybe he's waiting for me impatiently, don't overthink it, Mom. Initially, he didn't pay much attention, thinking that when he turned off the light, the old lady would probably go to rest in her room. Later, he realized something was not quite right. The next morning was still vibrant. Birds chirped as they pecked at the window curtains. He rubbed his messy hair as he went downstairs. "Mom, why are you still sitting on the sofa? Mom, you didn't go back to your room all night?" "Mom," the man hurried down the stairs. The morning light was as tender as ever. The old woman had her eyes closed, sitting peacefully on the sofa. But this time, no matter how he called out, he couldn't wake her up. The morning breeze passed by the windowsill. He remembered, on the day his father passed away, his mother didn't shed a single tear. She said, "Once everything is settled, we'll meet again." And maybe this time, she just felt she should go find him. Just like how, in the beginning, he pulled her out of a dirty and unbearable abyss. Saved her.